Hello, I'm Jack.
I'm Eleanor.
And today we are walking the Ryde to Ventnor line. The Ryde to Ventnor line was built by the Isle of Wight Railway, initially the Isle of Wight Eastern Section Railway. It was the second line on the island to be built, starting in Ryde and visiting the popular coastal towns of Sandown and Shanklin before passing through St Boniface Down via tunnel and finishing in Ventnor. Now unfortunately we are going to have to start this video with a bit of a faux pas. As you know, this part of this line is still functioning as the island line, which means half of this walking video we are going to have to do riding the train.
Anyway, enough moaning. Let's head back to this morning before we look like drowned rats.
It's currently just after 9 and we're walking up Ryde Pier. The hovercraft's just going out. The weather is adequate, shall we say, and we're walking to our first station of the day, which is Ryde Pier Head.
Pier Head Station is the northern terminus of the line, allowing passengers to step directly from the ferry onto the train. Well, most of the time. The station is currently closed to a sea of high-vis jackets, working to transform the old tramway into a pedestrian walkway. The station now only has one functioning platform, a far cry from the steam era, where it once had 4.
We're at the second station of the day, which is Ryde Esplanade. Whilst we're here, I'll give you a bit of the history of the line.
The part of the line from St John's to Pier Head was built in 1880, a good decade after the rest of the railway. Until then, a horse-drawn tramway operated from the pier, down the Esplanade, across the Strand and to St John's. Its leisurely operating pace, though, was fast becoming a bottleneck for island tourism, and therefore 2 mainland railway companies joined forces to build a line that tunnelled under the streets and ran up a new pier alongside the already existing tramway and promenade ones.
We stopped briefly at Park Road Bridge by the bus museum over there, and we just wanted to check out the remains of the old gasworks. Unfortunately there's not much left, but we can do a comparison shot out of this book.
Next stop on the line is Ryde St John's Road. Finished in 1864, it was the initial northern terminus of the railway before the line to Pier Head was constructed. It's still very much in use today as the Island Line headquarters, and still boasts a few relics from its past as well, including these Isle of Wight Railway monograms and a 1928 signal box. Unfortunately though, the old steam shed is now long gone, having been replaced with a car park. Jumping on the train, the next stop is Brading. We skip Smallbrook Junction as it is an interchange only station for the steam railway, and we will visit it when we come to do that line.
So where are we now?
Brading.
Brading! We're at Brading. We arrived at Brading. We're the only people here. Got a whole big station to ourselves.
Brading Station is arguably the prettiest on the line, being well looked after by the Brading Railway Heritage Centre. Much of its original architecture still remains, including this signal box, which occasionally is open to the public. A temporary footbridge is in use as the original is in current need of repairs. Just north of here, a short line once branched off heading east over the marshes to Bembridge.
And this here is the platform which the Bembridge trains would have left from. Last train left in 1953, so I don't think there's any chance of getting one today, that's for sure. On another note, it started to rain.
Yay!
Back on the train, the line, which once was double track, runs parallel to the main road before climbing steeply into Sandown. So we arrived in Sandown, and what we having in Sandown?
Sausage roll.
Sausage roll. It's time for lunch. Sandown is once again an ode to its past, with the station building still in great condition. Unfortunately though, a fair bit of the station's original architecture is missing, including the canopies on platform 2 and the famous high-rising signal box. It is though the only station on the railway to have a functioning subway, and the rails are still in place in platform 3, which once served the long gone Sandown to Newport line. Does it work? So we just finished our sausage rolls. Almost. From here we're going to walk to Lake Station, which is a relatively new station. From there we're going to take the last stop, do the last journey on the Island line to Shanklin, where we actually get to then walk some abandoned railway line. Lake Station was built in the late 80s to serve the ever-growing town of the same name between Sandown and Shanklin. A very simple station, which if it was built back in the early days, would probably have been classed as a halt. So we're at Lake Station now, built in 1987. It's a bit boring here, there's not much to see. It's a wooden platform and like a bus shelter type shelter. But from here we're going to get the train that way to Shanklin, and then we can finally start walking. Stepping off at Shanklin, the first thing you notice is the now defunct platform 2, which has been made into a flower ornament. Again, the station has lost a lot of its past glory, but is still beautifully preserved. Shanklin was the original terminus of the line in 1864, before the extension to Ventnor via Wroxall was completed in 1866. The bridge which once traversed Landguard Road has been removed, but only a few paces up the railway alignment the other side soon starts to reveal clues to its past. So as you can probably tell, it's raining again. It's been lovely and sunny recently, but the one day that we have to do this actual video, it starts to rain. Yeah, typical, isn't it? Yeah. The line here falls into a deep cutting before passing under God's Hill Road, after which the railway emerges into open countryside and, unfortunately for us, bitter winds. So we're now at the point in which we started this video, in the lovely bit of countryside between Shanklin and Wroxall. Unfortunately it is still raining. This bit of the line opened in 1866, as I said earlier. It opened a bit later, but why? Well, the reason why is because of land. A lot of people around this area didn't like the idea of a railway being built through their area, and on top of that there was a tunnel to build through St Boniface Down, which was over 1,300 feet long, and there was also a big three-arch bridge which we're now going to visit.
After trying to get as many shots as possible before our hands freeze, it was onwards to Wroxall, where the station and goods yard complex are still clearly visible. The station house and platforms are long gone, though the hotel which once sat next to the platform still remains. From here, the line ran through these gardens and into the undergrowth. It was very difficult to trace the exact alignment of the railway, as part of it was replaced by a brook. From certain viewpoints though, the alignment can still be seen. Approaching Manorow Bridge, it's clear that the trackbed has somewhat been filled in. The summit of the line is located just south of here, near the bricked up north portal of the Ventnor Tunnel, which lurks ominously in the undergrowth. Just discussing, because the weather's pretty dire, and we were going to walk up over St Boniface Down, but I don't think that's going to happen today. We're going to have to walk around because it's very, very muddy, and I've already slipped over once, so.
I didn't laugh. Honest.
She didn't laugh. Opened in September 1866, Ventnor Station is both interesting and somewhat imposing. Built within the walls of a former quarry overlooking the town at 90 metres above sea level, it certainly was unique in many ways. The site is now an industrial estate, but a few reminders of the old station still remain. Unfortunately though, the tunnel portal is quite overgrown. But on the upside, the sun is finally coming out. So Eleanor's already gone to the pub to get the first round in. I thought I'd just quickly come to a viewpoint above the station to wrap up this video. In April 1966, this line was axed, the line from Shanklin to Ventnor, under the beaching axes, and since then there's been various attempts to reopen it. As recent as 2020, the Department of Transport conducted an investigation into reopening the line, but nothing came of it. Unfortunately, I think the costs outweigh the benefits with this one. But we've had a wonderful time walking the line, riding the line for most of it, but walking the rest of it. And please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. Hello, I'm Jack.
And I'm Eleanor.
Welcome to episode 2. It's sunny. We're doing the Ryde to Newport line. The Ryde to Newport line was opened by the Ryde and Newport Railway in 1875, with the section from Smallbrook Junction down to Ryde St John's being laid alongside the already existing Ryde to Ventnor line, thus making it double track. From here the line ran through Haven Street and Wootton before following the River Medina down to the island's capital at Newport. Then later on in 1877 it was merged with 2 other lines to become the Isle of Wight Central Railway. Now once again we have a conundrum, because part of this line is still functional as the Isle of Wight Steam Railway in fact, which means that for part of this line we're going to have to take the train once again. Now we could just walk the disused section of this line, but we've set ourselves the mission of visiting every single station that ever was, of which I believe there are 40. So today we're starting here at Smallbrook Junction, and then we're going to head down that way along the steam railway to a request stop called Ashy. Smallbrook Junction wasn't a station on the line until 1991, when the Isle of Wight Steam Railway restored the heritage line to the site. Oddly, the station is not accessible by foot, only by an interchange platform for the Island Line. The steam railway station, as you'd expect, has been decorated in age-appropriate features, as the Island Line side is more basic and functional. Our locomotive for the trip is WD-92 Wagoner, a newly overhauled austerity tank engine which had been built in 1953 for work on the Longmoor Military Railway in Hampshire. So the next stop is Ashy. We're on the train right now, and it's a request stop, which means you have to ask the guard, who then asks the driver to stop for you. So we've positioned ourselves in a carriage that will stop at the platform, and hopefully he remembers. We
climb out of Smallbrook Junction and under Ashy Road, continuing up the 1 in 75 incline towards the summit of the line just before Ashy. Ashy Station opened in 1875 and was originally the only station on the line to have a passing loop. Ironically now, it's the only station on the Heritage Railway to not have one. The original station is now a private residence, and part of the former platform is still visible. In 1953 the station was downgraded to a halt and resituated to where it is now. The line through Ashy closed in 1966, but reopened as part of the Heritage Line in 1991. Unusually though, if we take a look at this OS map from 1907, we can see that there once was a second station in Ashy. Now you wouldn't have thought it, but this undergrowth here, this little bit of woodland here, there used to be a railway line which used to branch off the main one and come up alongside this hedgerow and go into the side of Ashy Down into a quarry. And along this little bit of railway line there used to be another station called Ashy Racecourse. Ashy Racecourse Station opened in 1884 to ferry passengers to and from the races. The racecourse itself consisted of a track and a wooden grandstand. Now it's difficult to approximate exactly where Ashy Racecourse Station was, but we believe it was next to the grandstand, and according to the maps it was around here somewhere, which is where the grandstand was, just the other side of the hedge there. The grandstand itself was gutted by fire in 1929 and no trace of it or the station remain. The only clue that there was ever a railway line here is this tunnel entrance, which once served the quarry the other side of the main road. Back on the train, the next station is Haven Street, centre of the award-winning Isle of Wight Steam Railway. So we're here at Haven Street, at the Steam Railway, the centre of the Steam Railway. There's plenty to do here. We're going to go and have some lunch, and then we're going to go and have a look round to all the museums and the train story, and then we're going to go get the next train up the line to Wootton to the next station. Haven Street now consists of multiple workshops, storage sheds and museums. It was once just a small station on a single line until Southern Railways installed a crossing loop in 1926. Since the Steam Railway took over the site in 1971, it has managed to build an iconic collection of stock, including these two ex-Ryde Pier trams and a Class 483 underground unit, which ran on the Island Line until the start of 2021. We jump on the train for the last time this series and head up the line to the west terminus of the Heritage Line at Wootton. The station itself has been beautifully decorated, depicting a bygone era of the Isle of Wight Central Railway. Now I should say Wootton New Station, because as authentic as it looks, this station was actually built in 1986 by the Isle of Wight Steam Railway. The original station is 200 yards that way. The original Wootton station was opened in 1875 on the opposite side of the road. It closed prematurely though in 1953 due to a low footfall and landslips from the bank above. So we just come down this incline here, and there used to be a railway bridge there going underneath the main road, and down here somewhere amongst this foliage is the original Wootton station. We're going to see if there's any platforms remaining. I doubt there will be. I'm going to have a rummage round. Apart from an odd brick structure and some scattered masonry, nothing could be found in the undergrowth, at least where I was searching. So we hopped back on the path and moved towards Newport, the next station on the line being Whippingham. Crossing Park Road, the alignment continues dead straight to Whippingham Station. At this point in the video it's time to pass over to Eleanor to tell you a bit about one of her favourite historical figures and their important connection with the station itself.
Hi! Did you know that Whippingham Station was built for one reason? The sole reason was the proximity of a private residence for one person. A very important person. Her Majesty Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria was a great admirer of the railway development. In 1842 she became the first British monarch to travel by train. Because of this, a number of private stations were built for the monarch and the royal family's use. One of which was Whippingham, built in 1875 to allow her to travel the short distance to her favourite private seaside retreat, Osborne House. It was only after Queen Victoria's death in 1901 that Whippingham became a public station. Her Highness was not the only historical woman to be associated with Whippingham Station though. Another important key figure was Emily Merwood, who in 1888 became the station mistress at Whippingham after inheriting the role from her father-in-law. Whippingham Station closed in 1953, though the line through it was still in use until 1966.
So we're at Whippingham Station, and just behind me over here is Owen, who's been very kind to us, letting us have a look at his land. Hello, Owen. And telling us some great facts about Whippingham itself. It's really lovely. It's been restored really well. It's absolutely beautiful. And we're going to get a couple shots here, and then we're going to head on down the line towards Newport. This has all been rebuilt.
Yeah, I mean, this is it was done in the 70s, so it's pretty much a new roof in the 70s, but
yes,
using this original tiles.
So this was reputed to be Victoria's waiting room?
Yes.
Wow.
She only documentation says she only came here once.
Okay.
And that was to go to Ventnor to open up the hospital, which is now the Botanic
Yes,
Garden.
1888, I think it's something like that, wasn't it? Yeah.
So, because of course, as soon as they opened the station,
Yeah.
they built the pier in Osborne Bay.
Okay, so she could get the boat across straight away.
Yeah.
After we said our thank yous to Owen for showing us around his wonderful home, it was onwards down the trackbed, which follows the alignment of the main road, along Fairley and into Newport.
So we're now at the point in which the walkable part of this line ends. As you can see behind me, there is a fence, which there is a bridge behind that, which you can't walk across. And down here, we're going to have to walk down this embankment, down to the main roads along Fairley, and then join the line a little further up.
The short diversion away from the trackbed may have been frustrating, but it wasn't long before we were back on the alignment and walking down towards Newport. The railway cutting down to Howbury Lane is still somewhat clear, but on the other side, earthworks in the housing development have warped the alignment somewhat. That is until you reach Fairley Tunnel, which is still clearly visible, and now used as an underpass for Fairley Road. Most of the original tunnel can still be seen, but it's clear that at the west portal an extension has been added. From here, a viaduct once carried the line into Newport Station. Annoyingly for us though, just as we were coming to the conclusion of this video, disaster struck.
As you can probably tell, it is a different day. We've come back the day afterwards, because just as we got out of Newport Tunnel yesterday, our camera died on us. So we've had to come back today just to film the Newport bit. This is where Newport Station used to be. It's now a car park and it was moved away. It shut in 1966 and was used as a storage site for the Isle of Wight Steam Railway stock until 1971 when they were evicted. And then the station was demolished to make way for the Medina dual carriageway. The only relic around here that still exists is just behind us, which is the power station, which shut in 1920, and that's still standing to some extent. From here, trains would go up towards Cowes. There would also be a branch that went on to Freshwater, and down that way there would be a branch that went to Sandown. So there are 4 branches from here, and none of them exist anymore. It's been completely flooded. Nothing left of the railway, unfortunately. So thank you very much for watching this video, and please like and subscribe. I brought the smallest umbrella, very wet. Thank you very much again, and we'll see you for the next episode, episode 3.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Hello, I'm Jack.
And I'm Eleanor.
And welcome to episode 3 of Wight Wanderers Disused Railway Lines of the Isle of Wight. Today, we are walking the oldest railway on the island.
The Cowes and Newport Railway was built in 1862, running 4.5 miles in length along the western bank of the River Medina. Initially there were only 2 stations on the line until Mill Hill was built in 1871 to passenger shipyard workers to and from the docks. Then in 1878 Medina Wharf opened to supply coal and goods to the island. Soon after, a platform was constructed here to serve the workmen. Finally, in 1905, another halt was constructed at the cement mills further down the line, although some sources state that a halt may have existed here as early as the 1870s.
So you can probably see behind me just about, you can see the old power station through the gates there, and over there is Newport Station. We've just come down here to film it because the Medina Way is very noisy, so you can't really hear us. But from here we're going to walk up along the railway line, along the River Medina to Cowes.
Newport Station was the hub of the Isle of Wight Central Railway network, with 4 lines branching north, south, east and west to various locations across the island. The alignment of the line out of Newport to Cowes is now a business park, which has totally obliterated what was once a busy railway, engine shed and goods sidings. The first part of the line that is actually traceable is in Medina Riverside Park by Newport Rowing Club. From here the route quickly becomes more and more scenic. Little is left of any railway infrastructure, so we tightened our laces and pressed on. As we cross Dodnor Lane, the alignment curves softly to the right before crossing the water at Dodnor Nature Reserve. Here, the viaduct has been replaced, but a quick look underneath reveals what appears to be the original railway structure. A short detour to Dodnor Causeway reveals the structure from a distance. From this point you can also spot the PS Ryde, a paddle steamer which once used to be a nightclub, unfortunately now is beyond repair and due to be scrapped. This was also the site of the original cement kilns, which were only rediscovered as recently as 2017 when contractors cleared the site as part of a funded project.
So as you can see, we're just in front of the old cement kilns. You probably hear the birds, they're very loud. The viaduct's just over here. In 1879, when the line from Newport to Sandown was finally connected to Newport, it meant that they could run trains from here at the cement mills down to the quarry at Ryde, and which of course was very important for business. The only downside to this place though was of course the smell itself, and there was one person in particular that complained about it, who was
Her Majesty Queen Victoria. So there were accounts that she complained about the smell from her residence Osborne House, which is 2 miles away.
The undergrowth around Cement Mills Halt was cleared in 2009 to reveal a wooden structure still standing. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like the site has seen a strimmer or a sickle for a while. From here, we continue up the western bank of the River Medina, to the site which once was the Werra Brickworks.
Now it's here that we'd like to actually ask you a question, because as far as we know there are 3 intermediate stops or halts on this line. So there's Medina Wharf, there is Mill Hill and there is Cement Mills Halt. But while we're doing research for this line, we came across something a bit puzzling and very interesting.
On this OS map from 1947, we can see the Cement Mills Halt depicted as a black rectangle filled in with diagonal lines next to the running line. If we move on up the line to the brickworks on the same map, there doesn't seem to be anything resembling a platform or structure next to the line. Of course, why would there be? On an earlier OS map though, published in 1866, there's this structure. It appears to be similar in shape and close to the running line, as you would expect a platform to be.
We can't find anything about it online. Was there a station here? Was there a halt here? Was one planned but never built? Or did it just happen to be a building that was demolished earlier on that was very close to the line. Please let us know if you do know, because we'd be very interested to find out.
There are in fact no less than 2 brickworks here. Werra Brickworks, founded by one Albert Edward Flux, said to be built on the site of a previous brickworks dating back to the early 1800s, of which not much is known about. And further up, Chambler's Brickworks, managed by Edmund Pritchett from 1846. It seems to be around this area on the map that the mystery structure appears. The next stop on the line is Medina Wharf, which dates back to the 1870s and was extensively improved in 1928 by the Southern Railway when most coal and goods imports were shifted from St Helens to Cowes itself. Though the line was closed in 1966, the goods traffic continued for another year. It is hard to imagine where the layout of the sidings would have been, though this sole remaining post in the undergrowth may offer a clue, as it resembles this one in a photo from 1955. The halt itself, though, unfortunately, is long gone. As we walk past the site of the now long demolished gasworks near Smithards Lane, we travel up Arctic Road, alongside the new build properties which were constructed on the path of the old railway line. Here we reach this small remaining corner of railway history. Mill Hill Station is now a cosy little park, but there's no missing the obvious clue to its railway past. The platform edge also is still visible. Just around the corner along St Mary's Road, hidden away at the back of another park, is the North Portal. The tunnel itself was 208 yards long and the first railway tunnel constructed on the Isle of Wight. From this point, an overbridge carried the line over St Mary's Road before heading under Granville Road Bridge, curving sharply into the north terminus at Cowes. Here, unfortunately, all is gone of the railway and replaced by recent developments, though on this map you can just about see where the line would have been.
And here we are at Cowes Station, once a busy terminus for trains all the way from Ryde and from Ventnor and Newport. Now it's an M&S, and the only clues to his past glory are perhaps 1 or 2 street names and not much else, unfortunately.
Cowes is a busy tourist hotspot famous for hosting one of the longest running regattas in the world. Unfortunately, the railway was axed in 1966 and none of its infrastructure remains. So next time you're cramped on the number 1 bus in a traffic jam along Newport Road, just remember 60 years ago you could have got the train. So well done, Mr. Beechey.
Thank you for watching once again, and we had a lot of fun filming this video. Please like and share and subscribe, and we'll see you for episode 4.
Bye.
Hello, I'm Jack.
And I'm Eleanor.
And welcome to White Wanderers Disused Railways of the Isle of Wight, episode 4. Today we are in...
Brading!
We are back in Brading because we first came here in episode 1 where we did the Ryde to Ventnor line, and in that episode I muttered these words. And this here is the bay that the Bembridge trains would have left from. Last train left in 1953, so I don't think there's any chance of getting one today. So we've returned to Brading to walk this line. It's only 2.5 miles long, but it's a very important line which shaped a lot of the landscape around this area.
To tell the story of the Bembridge branch, we have to start with a bit of context about the land itself. In the Roman period, a body of water ran from Bembridge across Brading marshland all the way down to Yeverland, almost completely separating Culver and Bembridge from the rest of the island. By the 1800s though, the water had receded back to Brading Harbour, but it was not until the railway was built in the 1870s that the harbour was cut off by a man-made embankment between St Helens and Bembridge. The railway was built by the Brading Harbour Company, although the first spur from Brading to a jetty on Brading Haven was built by the Isle of Wight Railway in the 1860s, before the harbour was reclaimed. You can see it here on this map from 1866. Anyway, by the time the line opened in 1882, a cement works was built next to the site of the now defunct jetty. Heading further up the line we have Carpenter's Brickworks, a short stop from St Helens, the only intermediate station on the line, where a quay was constructed to import and export goods to and from the mainland. The final part of the line traversed what was once the mouth of the estuary and terminated at Bembridge. Now, the railway was built by the Brading Harbour Company, but the trains themselves were run by the Isle of Wight Railway, and in 1898 the railway was absorbed into the Isle of Wight Railway. Brading Station was opened by the Isle of Wight Railway in the mid-1860s, almost 20 years before the Bembridge branch line was complete. We just crossed the island line, which goes towards Ryde this way. Brading Station is behind us. The Bembridge branch used to run alongside this for about 50 metres from the crossing, and then would curve sharply to the right towards St Helens. The first step on the line is the cement works at Wall Lane, named as such due to its proximity to the original seawall at Brading. The works are now long gone, with the land being built on, although a source online by the owner's daughter states that the original ovens survive underneath the land that the stables now occupy. From this aerial photograph we can also see how this line snaked its way from Brading in the background to the site of the cement works and the adjoining sidings, used later on to store carriages and railway stock. Just taking a quick detour across the marshes to try and get a comparison shot. Now, we haven't managed to get hold of a photo online of the cement works, but we found one in this book. This is Isle of Wight steam passenger stock by Maycock and Reed, which may seem irrelevant to this particular video, but if we turn to page 78, please, glamorous assistant. So there's a photo here which the bio states was taken in 1929 somewhere on the Bembridge branch, and I would wager a guess that those chimneys in the background are the chimneys of the old cement works. And I think that photo was taken from about there, with the chimneys in the background on the skyline. From here the line cuts its way through the marshland and across part of the island still deeply rich in nature. So we're just coming up to Carpenter's Brickworks, and oh, there's the bridge. It's just here, and which means that just over here in front of me is where Carpenter's railway siding used to be, where they used to store a lot of the passenger stock. Now, apparently part of the brickwork still remains. Actually, in fact, that looks like it over there. That looks like an old building. That looks like the one. Yeah, so it says online that the building closest to the old line was part of the brickworks and still remains. And it looks like it's in front of us. Apart from the presence of a siding, not much is known about the brickworks here. It was owned by farmer and brickmaker Oliver Faithful from 1898 and still appears on the OS map in 1946. Now, unfortunately, the line from here onwards to St Helens is private land, apart from this one little area which it says on my trekking app that you can actually get to part of the fish ponds. So we're going to try and get to the track bed from through there.
It just looks nice.
Ah, okay. Maybe not then. So my trekking app was wrong, which is great. You can't walk through there, so we're going to have to go up and around and rejoin the track bed at St Helens. Station Road at St Helens is clear at the top of the hill, although the station itself is right at the bottom. The building is still intact and preserved as a private home. It opened in 1882 and dwindled in passenger numbers until its closure in 1953. Until the reconstruction of Medina Wharf by the Southern Railway in the 1920s, St Helens was the main railway dock on the island. It was also the site of a short-lived goods train ferry service between 1885 and 1888, where wagons would be loaded directly onto the carrier and shipped between St Helens and Langstone in Havant. This was the only time the island ever technically had a rail connection with the mainland. Apartments and holiday homes now occupy the site of the railway quay, although there still are some clues to its past.
So we just walked across Bembridge Causeway, which is just behind us over there. Now the railway never came along here. It went from St Helens straight to Bembridge, but we've come this side of the causeway because there are actually some railway artefacts.
The Isle of Wight railways have always been distinctive for using second-hand railway stock, the most famous being the ex-London Underground tube trains in recent years, but this tradition is nothing new. In the early days of the Isle of Wight railway, the company would save on costs by buying in second-hand stock from mainland companies. One such batch consisted of ex-Metropolitan carriages used on the island until the Southern Railway withdrew them in the late 1920s.
Now I know it may not look like it, but these are old railway carriages. They're old Metropolitan stock in fact, and they've been sat here for many years and long forgotten. I doubt many people walk past them now and actually realise that they're old railway carriages. There's also quite a few in front of me, which I've just seen, but we're going to get some comparison shots.
Many withdrawn carriage bodies were sold off for domestic purposes, which is what happened with these. The Metropolitan line is now of course part of the London Underground, so you could argue that these carriages were in fact the first tube trains on the Isle of Wight.
Now these rather suave apartments behind me now stand on the site of the old South Quay at St Helens. If you were stood here before the 1870s, of course you wouldn't be able to stand here because this would be the mouth of the estuary, and if you wanted to cross to Bembridge you would have to get a ferry. Now of course we have the toll road and the path of the old railway, which is now a footpath. When the railway was built though, it cut off the estuary and the waters receded from Brading to here.
This part of the line is now a footpath and a regular spot for birdwatchers, being an area of outstanding beauty and rare creatures such as bitterns, kingfishers and nightingales. The embankment here is so narrow with water both sides, it's hard to imagine that once locomotives would have pulled trains to and from Brading through this haven of natural diversity. We were enjoying the views so much that we forgot to check where we were going.
So we're having to retrace our steps unfortunately, because we got to the end of the footpath just as we were coming into Bembridge. There's a big gate across the footpath, so a minor setback, but never mind, we're just going to have to follow the road into Bembridge station.
Walking into Bembridge, it wasn't soon before we came across the site of the station itself. Once again, apartments and holiday homes now occupy this area, but using the old adjoining buildings as a reference, we can place roughly where it once was. Right after the station was the main road. This stumped the railway's efforts to fit a head shunt beyond the platform so the locomotive could run around its train. Instead, a small wooden turntable was installed, operated only by human strength. Over the road is the site of the Royal Spithead Hotel, opened the same year as the railway in 1882. Unfortunately now, and inevitably, the site of more housing development.
And here we are at the site of Bembridge Station, which was just over there behind me. In front of me over here was the hotel which it served. They were both demolished unfortunately. The only building around here which is still relatively the same as it was back then is the Pilot Boat Inn, which I'm told serves a very good pint. So we're going to head there in a minute.
Anyway, that's it for episode 4, and with this video we are over halfway through the station list that we have. This is Bembridge was station number 22 out of 40 that have ever existed on the island. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time for episode 5. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Wight Wanderers Disused Railway Lines of the Isle of Wight. I'm Jack.
And I'm Eleanor.
And today we are walking the Freshwater Yarmouth Newport Railway, starting here in the very sunny yet windy Freshwater. Now, you've probably noticed there's been a little bit of a gap between the last episode we filmed and the episode today. And that's because this is actually the 3rd time we've attempted to film this one. So we were here a little bit further down there filming this segment about 2 weeks ago, and a little while afterwards the heavens opened and got us absolutely drenched. That's why we've got the umbrella with us today. Last week we had to postpone because of illness, so hopefully 3rd time's the charm. Right, let's crack on. The Freshwater Yarmouth and Newport Railway was built in 1889. The only railway line on the island to branch out west of Newport to the sparsely populated areas of the Isle of Wight. The line ran from Freshwater in the west up the river to Yarmouth, and then passing through Ningwood, Calbourne and Carisbrooke before terminating at the Isle of Wight Central Railway Station at Newport. The line also had 2 other stations that were built later on. Watchingwell Station was built in 1897 as a private halt, the only other addition being the separate station at Newport, built by the company in 1913, which lasted a mere 10 years before its closure in 1923. Freshwater Station was opened in 1889, though goods traffic on the line had begun the previous year. The building itself was situated right on the roadside at the bottom of Hook's Hill. Sadly, nothing remains of the building today, but if we venture into the garden centre adjacent, 1 or 2 hidden relics still remain, including part of the original platform and this station signpost, which can be seen here in this photo from the early 1950s. Now, when the Freshwater Yarmouth and Newport Railway opened, the trains themselves, the passenger trains, were actually operated by the Isle of Wight Central Railway to save costs. But this resulted in a lot of arguments between the 2 companies about those operations themselves. And eventually in 1912, the Freshwater Yarmouth and Newport Railway bosses stormed into the Central Railway's offices and said, "Up with this, we shall not put. We are going to run the railway ourselves." Unfortunately, the Freshwater Yarmouth and Newport Railway didn't have a lot of stock, and the only stock they had was very outdated. As mentioned previously in episode 4, the Isle of Wight Railways have always been well known for acquiring hand-me-down stock from other companies. Not so much a tradition as a way of minimising costs. The Freshwater Yarmouth and Newport Railway stock consisted at the time of old 4-wheeled wooden body carriages, a Manning Wardle 060 saddle tank named Medina, and an A1 Terrier locomotive called Freshwater, built as early as 1876. This locomotive amazingly still survives to this day at the Isle of Wight Steam Railway. 2 locomotives weren't enough though, and the company resorted to buying a very unconventional 3rd one. Once again we come back to the superb Isle of Wight Steam passenger rolling stock book by Maycock and Reed, presented superbly by Nell, looking glamorous as always. Now if we turn to page 48, you can see here the picture of a very odd vehicle. This is in fact a petrol-driven Drury rail car bought in 1913 by the railway and used on passenger services by the company. Now the caption reads, "Although a thrill to drive, what passengers used to more conventional trains thought of it was not recorded." As the line left Freshwater, it headed north-east up the River Yar to Yarmouth. This part of the line is an established foot and cycle path, passing through an area of outstanding beauty and biological scientific interest. The railway follows the river continuing northeast to the mouth of the estuary at Yarmouth. So we're now approaching Yarmouth Mill, which was built in 1793, and it's the last tide mill relic left on the Isle of Wight after the one in Wootton was demolished in the 1960s. The mill here at Yarmouth, now a private dwelling, is said to have had a troublesome past with the railway. When the line here was built in the 1880s, it crossed the mill pond. It is thought that this act in fact reduced the water flow, causing loss of power to the mill, eventually leading to its decline. Whether this is a true fact cannot be said. What is a true fact though is how incredibly preserved Yarmouth railway station is. Now in use as a cafe and heritage area, the building pays tribute to its long gone previous function. Yarmouth is the oldest town in the Isle of Wight and the second smallest town in England, which is notable when you compare it to its neighbour Freshwater, which holds a population 7 times greater but still curiously classed as a village. Heading over Rothford Marsh, we reach Thorley Road, where the footpath abruptly ends. Now here we come to the first issue of this railway line, which is some of it has been reclaimed and is unwalkable. So we're having to take a quick detour along the main road and then join the track bed further up. A little further down the road, we found a footpath cutting through the woodland at Thorley. After stumbling across some sheep and hay bales, we rejoined the track bed heading east at Hill Place Lane, with the alignment west having been completely reclaimed by farmland, stressing just how rural this railway was. Now after the Freshwater, Yarmouth and Newport railway split from the Central, they went directly into receivership, and they needed a USP, a unique selling point for the line. So they decided to revive an old idea, an idea that's been around for a while, and it's still around to this day, still very controversial, the Solent Tunnel. For residents of the Isle of Wight, the Solent Tunnel subject has been a hot potato for many years, with pubs across the island echoing to the sound of opinions on both sides of the fence. The idea, though, is not a new one. In as early as 1874, construction started on a tunnel under the Solent. It reached a depth of 150 feet, and then subsequently the idea was abandoned. The idea then reappeared in 1886, proposing a tunnel from Ryde to Stokes Bay. Of course, this never happened. 15 years later, the first proposition to join the Freshwater line to the mainland via tunnel was highlighted, proposing the use of electric trains as early as 1901. Again, this came to nothing. Finally, in 1913, the Freshwater, Yarmouth Newport Railway revived the idea once again, pushing it as a staple of the newly independent company. Their pockets though were bare, and with the onset of World War I, the plan was soon forgotten once again. Now if you'd like to learn more about the history of the Solent Tunnel scheme, there's a great video on Paul and Rebecca Whitewick's channel which delves deeply into the history of the subject. A little further along is Lee Brickyard, of which the cottage remains. We cannot find a lot of information on this yard, but the OS map suggests that many of the buildings were demolished by 1907. The track bed from here to Ningwood shows little left of its railway past, apart from the occasional discarded railway sleeper. Just west of Wellow, the walkable track bed stops, and once again we are forced to take a detour. At Ningwood, the railway alignment can be seen from the main road as it approaches the station, with the western edge of the platforms visible from a distance. Ningwood opened in 1889 and in the later years was the only passing loop on the whole line. It closed in 1953 with the rest of the railway and has since been lovingly restored, with platforms still very visible. There is one noticeable relic missing from this scene though. The road bridge which once overlooked Ningwood Station appears to have gone, and the road has been somewhat re-levelled to the surrounding area. So here we are at Ningwood Station, a rather large station given the fact that it was and still is a rural area. Now it's a stunning private dwelling, and it's been restored, platforms and all. So this is where we leave you today. Next time we will be continuing the story of this line, tracing it all the way back from here to Newport. Thank you very much for watching, as always, and we will see you next time. All the best, take care.
Bye.
Bye. Hello and welcome to episode 6 of White Wanderers Disused Railway Lines of the Isle of Wight. I'm Jack.
And I'm Eleanor.
And today we are walking the second part of the Freshwater line, starting here where we left off last time in Ningwood. Now Ningwood station is actually 100 metres that way, but we are going this way towards Newport and the next station on the line, Calbourne. Though before that there are one or two past railway relics to check out. The second part of this trip will take us from Ningwood east past Doughty's Brickworks in Calbourne before visiting the private halt at Watchingwell. Further along we reach Gunville at the site of another brickworks. Here we trace the line through an abundance of new builds via Carisbrooke to the eastern terminus at Newport. Our first stop is the brickworks east of Ningwood. This site was founded by Henry Doughty in 1905 and was served by a railway siding south of the running line. The site itself was only active for 24 years and closed in 1929. All but apparent rubble remains, with the chimney being demolished in World War II for fears of it being used as a landmark for enemy aircraft to navigate. Now, not too far east of the brickworks, the track bed abruptly stops, and this is because there is quite a substantial drop the other side of the trees to the bed of the Shish Ford. Spanning over this gap, carrying the railway, would have been a rather substantial viaduct. Now we're hoping to get a glimpse of the feet of the viaduct, which still do apparently exist, but it is that time of year where everything is rather overgrown, and apparently the embankments are quite steep, so we'll see. Do you want to push me down the hill? The viaduct over the Shish Ford, or River Calbourne, was opened for traffic in 1889. The girders were supported by concrete footings, which still remain in situ to this day. If you would like to know more about the remains of the Calbourne Viaduct, there is a video up on Jeff IOW's channel which takes a closer look at the site. Meanwhile, in this video, we are on our first frustrating detour to the site of Calbourne Station. Unfortunately for us, on the day we did this walk, Elm Lane had been blocked off by what looked like water main repairs. So the following footage had to be filmed at a later date after an essential trip to the local pub, of course. Much like Ningwood, the station at Calbourne sits in an area of vast remoteness. Unlike Ningwood though, this station reflected the ruralness of its surroundings, with a small cottage-style appearance and a short goods siding. The location of the station actually caused disputes between the two villages of Calbourne and Shelfleet, chiefly about the name of the station itself, whether it should be called Calbourne and Shelfleet or just Calbourne. Eventually the residents of Shelfleet took matters into their own hands and proudly graffitied the word Shelfleet on the station sign. The alignment of the line from here is not as apparent as it would appear, snaking right up the obvious tree line through the field before swinging back northeast towards Pound Lane. The crossing cottage here has unfortunately been demolished, and all that seems to be left are the crossing gate posts. Looking east again, we can see how the line runs across the field, this time joining the noticeable tree line. Further down Pound Lane though, we stumble across something unexpected. On the grounds of Stone Farm appears to be the body of an old railway carriage, perhaps one that was once used on the railway. After yet another detour through private land, we pass the site of Swainston Manor. The original house here dated back to the 8th century. The current building was built in the 1700s though, and was owned by Sir John Simeon. So we're just walking up this dirt road from Swainton Manor. There's a muddy little track in the middle of nowhere, but up this track is a significant hidden relic of the Freshwater, Yarmouth and Newport Railway.
The small hump in the track may go unnoticed, but hidden in the undergrowth either side, brickwork can be found. A short walk around the path reveals the structure in full, albeit partially filled in. This intact railway bridge has laid dormant and overgrown for 70 years. Approaching Watchingwell, the views open out over an achingly pretty landscape. The station building itself still stands to this day as a private dwelling. The land around it was once owned by Sir John Stephen Simeon of Swainton Manor, son of the aforementioned. He requested a private station be built in 1897 to be used only by himself, family and friends. He died in 1909, but it wasn't until 1923, when the Southern Railway took over, that the station appeared on the public railway timetable. We are now approaching the far reaches of Newport, and after a short walk along the trackbed, we are forced off the alignment of the line once again, as it becomes abundantly clear how little of this railway is still walkable. This view from the intact overbridge at Betty Haunt Lane is a prime example of the issue, though the subtle change in the colour of the field blatantly shows where the long-gone railway once stood. Although the line from here eastwards was depicted as a footpath on the map, it appears once more a detour was necessary in order to not trespass. As we stumble across the first populous area of the video, inevitably much has changed, with the housing development and angling lake being built over the site of the once vast Gun Wharf brickworks, situated just west of Gunville Road. Gunville is located just northwest of Carisbrooke, an area on the island famous for its castle, where Charles I was held prisoner shortly before his execution in 1649. Unfortunately though, much like himself, our time had also run out.
So yes, it is another day. You can probably tell by our clothes, Nell's lovely new haircut, my inability to shave, and it's actually sunny, which is amazing. It's August and it's sunny. Who would have thought? When we got into Gunville the other day, it was already about 8 o'clock. We completely misjudged the amount of detours we had to take. So we're going to pick up from Gunville and walk the line through Carisbrooke to Newport, the next station on the line being Carisbrooke.
This map overlay shows just how much of the area has changed over the years. Despite this though, the line is still traceable, as it roughly follows the alignment of Fieldfair Road to Carisbrooke Station. The station was located in what is now the playfield in Carisbrooke School. Though not a trace of the station is left, the dip in the landscape where the line ran is still considerably noticeable. The station was relatively busy during the summer months with visitors to the castle, but once the bus routes started to appear, the traffic was lost. The small goods siding seen little use aside from the movement of prisoners in World War II.
So we're trying to find the path of the line from Carisbrooke to Newport. Of course, most of this area now is littered with new roads and new builds. Back in the 50s though, when this line was axed, there was only one road. It was called Petticoat Lane, and we're going to try and find it now.
From Carisbrooke to Petticoat Lane, the line headed northeast past the Pavilion and Victoria Recreational Ground, opened in 1902. Another detour through modern housing development is then necessary before we stumble across Petticoat Lane.
And here we are at Petticoat Lane, once the only road in the area, now a mere footpath amongst a sea of cul-de-sacs and new builds. From here we're going to walk down the path that way and try and find the place where the railway crossed Petticoat Lane.
A little further down the path we find the point in which the railway once crossed. A solitary portion of rail left sticking out the ground, perhaps as an indication, although on the other side, hidden behind a fence, lay a rather larger indication.
perhaps the only remaining relic of the railway in this area, the gatekeeper's cottage, which can be seen in the far left of this picture taken in the early 1900s. Onwards, the alignment is traceable as an elevated section behind the new builds before it emerges alongside the northern wall of what is now a supermarket. Here, on approach to Newport, was perhaps the most spectacular and unusual segment of the line. For users of the number 1 bus, this area at the bottom of Honey Hill is perhaps highly recognisable. 70 years ago though, a rather imposing object would have also been visible in this shot. A trestle viaduct, carrying the line from the embankment on the west, over Honey Hill and the brook to the brick portion of the structure, finally curving into Newport. We are now only 100 metres before the end of the line at Newport Station, but strangely enough, there is actually another station on this line.
So if you remember all the way back in part 1, I explained that in 1913 the Freshwater Yarmouth Newport Railway and the Isle of Wight Central Railway split, and up to this point the Isle of Wight Central Railway had been running the passenger services on the line, and that was fine because Newport Railway Station was owned by the Central Railway. But after this split, the Freshwater Yarmouth Newport Railway had no station to terminate in Newport, so they had to build their own one.
The station itself was a clear depiction of the company's financial woes at the time, in stark contrast to other terminus stations on the island like Cowes and Ventnor. With their large and lavish proportions, the Freshwater Yarmouth and Newport Railway terminus at Newport consisted of a wooden platform, a waiting shelter and little else. The station itself was in use for a mere 10 years before grouping in 1923. When the Southern Railway took over the island's railways, allowing freshwater trains to once again terminate at the main station at Newport. Though this in itself was a bit of a palaver, as the location of the junction being north of the station rather than south meant that trains from Freshwater would have to be taken partially up the line towards Cowes before being shunted back into the station. This continued until the 21st of September 1953, when after the loss of revenue was deemed unsustainable and the line closed for good, marking the end for this beautifully quirky railway and its troubled yet charming history.
And that is the story of the Freshwater Yarmouth and Newport Railway. We do hope you've enjoyed watching these videos, and if you have, please do like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time for episode 7. Hopefully it will be this sunny again. Take care.
Bye. Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the White Wanderers Disused Railways of the Isle of Wight. I'm Eleanor.
And I'm Jack, and today for the penultimate episode of the series we are in Sandown and we are doing
The Sandown to Newport line.
Of the list of 40 stations on the Isle of Wight, we have done 29 so far. We have 11 left to go, and we are going to visit quite a few of those today. So let's crack on. Much like the Freshwater branch, the tale of the Sandown and Newport line is of financial hardship. The construction process, which took 3 years between 1872 and 1875, resulted in the company owing a vast amount of money. Ironically, it was opened by the Isle of Wight Newport Junction Railway, an unfortunate name as for the first 4 years of its operation the line didn't even connect into Newport, instead terminating at a temporary station on the outskirts of town near Pan Lane. For the most part, the railway followed the course of the Eastern Yar and had 6 intermediate stations, passing through Alveston, Newchurch, then Horringford, before swinging northwest via Merston, Blackwater and Ryde. In 1869, the company opened a viaduct over Coppins Bridge, allowing the line to eventually reach Newport Station. Sandown Station was opened in 1864 by the Isle of Wight Railway, a good decade before the line to Newport was even constructed. One defining characteristic of the station was its high-standing signal box on platform 2. When the canopy was taken down though, the signal box gained a very strange appearance. Towering over the station, it would sway in the high winds, making it extremely dangerous and inevitably leading to its demolition. Platform 3, which once accommodated the Newport trains, is still in situ, although used only for storage. From the station looking north, you can just about see where the railway would have ran, curving sharply to the west before joining the course of the Eastern Yard. West of the station, part of the railway embankment can still be seen, now severed by modern housing development and a holiday campsite.
We are now just alongside the holiday camp. This is where you can start walking the first part of the trackbed towards Newport.
The first point of interest is the waterworks siding at Langwood Lane, used for goods traffic and storage. The site is now a water treatment plant, but probably more recognisable as the start of the Walk the Wight Flat Walk, an annual charity-run walking event. From here, most of the trackbed is walkable all the way to Newport, and there are many railway relics to see.
Even though the line shut in the mid-50s, a fair few of the station buildings still remain in good condition and have been converted into private dwellings. A prime example of this is the first station on the line, which is Alveston.
Alveston Station was built a good couple of years before the line opened in 1875. The original platform was soon replaced and a goods siding added. Cut to the present day, and the station has been restored as a private dwelling with periodical features and information boards with great facts about the railway's past. From here, the railway continued to border the river at low elevation, which would frequently result in flooding along the line. The Southern Railway tried to rectify the issue in 1924 by replacing many of the railway's wooden structure bridges with steel and concrete. It is not clear though whether this made much of a difference.
Now, even though the railway connected two major towns on the Isle of Wight, it passed through secluded marshland just south of the Middle Downs. Because of this, the railway relied mainly on goods traffic, which is why every intermediate station on the line had a goods siding. That alone, though, was not enough, and by 1885, just 10 years after the line had opened, the company had already gone bankrupt.
The company struggled on for another 2 years until 1887, when it was decided that the line would be merged with the already existing Cowes and Newport Railway and the Ryde and Newport Railway to form one company, the Isle of Wight Central. This merging aided goods connections to and from Medina Wharf and the cement mills, but did little to boost the passenger numbers. The railway continued to struggle to turn over a profit, and when the Southern Railway took over in 1923, they took action, sacking station masters and downgraded some stations to halts. The next station on the line is Newchurch, a little village situated some distance away from the station, up on top of a steep hill. Even for the small amount of people that actually lived here at the time of the railway, it would have been somewhat of an inconvenience to use. The station itself had many of its original buildings replaced by timber ones in 1934, presumably to save costs. The station building did survive though, until an unlucky encounter with a World War II bomb. As a result, nothing is left of the station but a small piece of the platform ramp.
Now, this part of the walk actually uses part of the trail called
The Red Squirrel Trail.
See, she can actually say it, I can't actually say it. Red Squirrel... There you go. But anyway, I was saying, so this part of the walk uses the trackbed for the Red Squirrel Trail. And This Red Squirrel Trail also uses the trackbed for the Newport, Cowes to Newport line. It also loops around at Merston and uses the trackbed from Wroxall to Shanklin. So if you want to walk 3 abandoned railway lines on the Isle of Wight in one go, then this is the trail for you, the Red Squirrel Trail.
Well done.
Thank you.
Anyway, Horingford is our next stop, situated on the very busy A3056, the main road between Sandown and Newport. The station building has once again been lovingly preserved, although from here we have to take a short detour off the trackbed past a jungle of bamboo to rejoin the alignment the other side of the station.
One thing that does strike you about this part of the line between Horingford and Merston is how steep it is, especially this section leading up to East Lane. Certainly trains would have struggled a bit on a wet autumn day, that's for sure, but luckily for us, so far the rain has held off, even though we've just felt, I just felt another one then, we just felt a few drops of rain, didn't we?
East Lane Bridge is the only overbridge left on the line, still in great condition. Though the view to the east is obscured somewhat, we can roughly compare it to this great shot of a train climbing the steep gradient that we've just walked up. The island platform at Merston has luckily been preserved, with recent additions to the site being the station sign and a shelter displaying an impressive amount of information about its history. Another line once branched off from here. Seen clearly in this photo facing east, we can see the railway we've just walked up curving left. Curving right though is the long defunct line to Whitwell and Ventnor West, a railway we will be tracing in the next episode. As we head out of Merston, inevitably it starts to rain. So let's continue with the troubled story of this railway. Now where was I?
Apart from the odd goods traffic, the railway was still making little to no profit at all. Even the addition of the Ventnor West branch in 1900 did little to aid the company's financial woes. But then finally, 50 years after the railway opened, a glimmer of hope.
In 1930, the Southern Railway started experimenting with through trains, faster services stopping only at essential stations. In 1933, the company commissioned the Tourist, a train that would run from Ventnor in the south over the Sandown and Newport line, where it would then join the Freshwater line heading west, completing the journey from Ventnor to Freshwater in a mere hour and a quarter. The train was a massive hit, and the company promoted it as their superior timetabled service.
The Tourist did exactly what it was supposed to do, connecting the seaside towns of Ventnor, Sandown and Shanklin with the tourist hotspots of Freshwater and Yarmouth out in the west. This lasted about 30 years, until the closure of the Freshwater line in 1953. Suddenly, the Tourist had nowhere to go, and it was ousted from the timetable. Once again, the Sandown to Newport line lost much of its convenience.
The next station on the line is Blackwater. Much like Horingford and Elverston, it has been lovingly restored and has also had an extension added to the side of the building. Blackwater was much like the other stations on the line, rural, seldom used by passengers, and had a good siding. Perhaps a small distinguishable feature being its collection of enamel advertising boards, displayed at the station in the peacetime between the two world wars.
We're now only a mile or so from the station at Ryde on the outskirts of Newport. Ryde was an interesting station. It was little used, but it had a vital connection to the wharf at Medina and the cement mills.
As we approach the outer reaches of Newport, Ryde station comes into view, though where it stood may not be that obvious. Next to Bombay Palace is the River Yar and the warehouse, which was built on the location of the station building. The alignment of the trackbed is also more obvious than you might think, as after the railway was dismantled, the river was rerouted along the course of the line. To find evidence of Ryde's connection with the cement mills at Medina, we have to head over the road and up a steep hill. Hidden in the trees along Burnt House Lane is a substantial chalk quarry. This vast industrial landscape was once linked directly to the line on the opposite side of the road, with wagons of chalk being propelled by gravity through a short narrow tunnel where it would then join the sidings at Ryde Station. This continued right up until the cement production ceased at the mill during World War II and the chalk pit at Ryde became obsolete. Heading back down the trackbed, the line now enters the heavily built up areas surrounding Newport. Little to nothing remains of the railway here, but hidden in the undergrowth opposite the now dilapidated Newport football ground is a reminder that a line once passed through this now overbuilt and over-trafficated corner of the island's capital. It's difficult to place exactly where the company's original terminus at Pan Lane would have sat, but judging by the proximity of the railway to Pan Mill on this map, it probably would have stood about here. We are standing on the footbridge over St George's Way between the cinema and the car park. You have Pan Lane in the distance over there, that's where the terminus was, and after they got the permission to extend the line into Newport, this would have been the alignment of it running up here and continuing north towards Newport. From here, the railway was carried by a viaduct across Coppins Bridge. It joined the Ryde and Newport Railway Viaduct about here, allowing trains to eventually run into Newport Station. For the railway itself, its history of low passenger numbers continued until its inevitable demise in 1956. If it had have stayed open though, it could have finally found practicality, as the suburbs of Newport and Sandown continue to grow to this day, and the A3020, the main road used between Sandown and Newport, is now infamous for its congestion. Perhaps then the Sandown to Newport line was just too ahead of its time to be of any use, but that we will never know. For the third and final time, we finish an episode here in Newport, once the centre of the island's railway infrastructure, now devoid of any railway infrastructure whatsoever. As you can see, the light is dying. We have run out of time, so we'll leave it there. Next time we are walking the last remaining railway of the series, and it's a very confusing one. It's a line from nowhere through nowhere to a town that already had a station.
And it has a tunnel.
And it does have a tunnel as well, so that'd be interesting. So we'll see you next time for the last episode of the series, episode 8.
Take care.
And all the best. Hello and welcome to episode 8, the final episode of Wight Wanderers Disused Railway Lines of the Isle of Wight. I'm Jack.
And I'm Eleanor.
And it is a grey, drizzly day in October. We are currently sat on the platform at Merston waiting for the train to Ventnor West. It hasn't turned up so far though, has it?
Maybe it's cancelled.
It might be, I'll check. We missed the last train.
When was it?
1952. Never mind, we're going to have to walk it. Do you want to say the line?
Let's crack on.
The last railway of the series is perhaps the most interesting, in that it really shouldn't have existed. Finished in 1897, 35 years after the construction of the Cowes to Newport Railway, the Ventnor West Railway branched off the Sandown to Newport line, heading south through the historical settlement of God's Hill before reaching the pretty village of Whitwell. A 619-yard tunnel was then bored out, emerging on the cliff face above the terminus at St Lawrence. It took a further 3 years for the railway to reach its final destination at Ventnor West, then called Ventnor Town. Ironically, this station was even further from the town than the original Ventnor station opened by the Isle of Wight Railway in 1866. Merston, situated a few miles southeast of Newport, is a small village built into the flatlands south of St George's Down. It's hard to imagine nowadays that this was once an interchange for two separate railways. The line to Ventnor West branched off east of the crossing, following the prominent tree line towards God's Hill.
Now, because this line closed so early, we're going to have pretty much the same issue as we did with the Freshwater branch, which is a lot of the alignment has been reclaimed by farmland. So what we're going to do is try and crisscross it as much as possible and see as much as we can. There are still a lot of relics left on this line, including a railway tunnel, so it's well worth it.
It certainly wasn't worth it though for the company that built the line. By the late 1800s, the Isle of Wight Newport Junction Railway, who run the Sandown to Newport line, were already financially crippled and had been incorporated into the Isle of Wight Central Railway. The operation of a new line branching off the railway, which was already bankrupt and passing through the proverbial end of nowhere to a town that already had a station, proved to be even more of a burden. Amazingly, even though it closed before any of the other railways on the island, all of the station buildings still exist, including the one at God's Hill, a simple one-platform halt, awkwardly situated half a kilometre west of the village centre.
And that really does highlight the issue with this railway. Now, the reason that a lot of station buildings on the island don't survive, like Cowes, Newport and, say, Freshwater, is because towns and villages have expanded and evolved over them. Yet on this line, the station buildings still survive, and that's because modern development still hasn't reached them yet. So you can imagine how barren and remote they must have been back in the 50s when this line shut. And the fact they built it decades after the other lines on the island, they had time to sit back and observe the financial woes of other rural railway lines, and yet they still built it. They still thought it was a good idea. The railway though did have one redeeming feature: its unmatching beauty.
From here to Whitwell, the countryside is rich and relatively untouched. The railway would have been a superb vantage point, gradually rising on a single track embankment, cutting straight across the Evergreen. In this density, we can also find evidence of other industrial activity, including this water-powered mill, which has sat abandoned in the woods since the early 1900s. This is Bridgecourt Corn Mill, which appeared on the maps in 1759, though it is said an earlier mill once stood in its place. Back to the railway though, and heading south, parts of the embankment appear to have been removed, possibly for farming purposes. But at Beacon Alley, the remains of a large overbridge is still a strong indicator to where the railway once ran.
So basically, a lot of the railway line between here and Whitwell is unwalkable. We have to crisscross over it via other footpaths, which is annoying because a lot of it is still very prominent on the landscape. It rises high above the surrounding fields on a big embankment, but it's all private land. So we had two choices. We could either walk up Deacon's Lane, something like that, and go the long way round, which is quite busy and quite narrow, or we could take the footpath through the woods, which we knew would be quite muddy. We did want to go to the pub at the end of this walk to celebrate the end of the series, but in the state we're in, I don't think they're going to let us in.
After a bit more trudging, we arrive at the little hamlet of Ryde. There was no station constructed here, but further down the road, the embankment is still quite noticeable amongst the tree line. Not letting the weather dampen our spirits or spoil the view, we find possibly the most prominent section of the railway embankment, sandwiched between Miller's Lane and Whitwell Road.
So here at Miller's Lane is a prime example of what I was talking about. You have the bridge abutment on the south side and the embankment going towards Whitwell. But if you pan over this way, you can actually see the whole of the land has been flattened. There's no embankment anymore, and it's all been reclaimed by farmland.
One thing that has become apparent so far is how much engineering work was put into this line. Counting 7 overbridges so far, or possibly more, on a railway which was logically flawed. Approaching Whitwell, we admire the charming buildings and of course pay a visit to the local library. The station here was possibly the grandest of all the stations on the line, and featured 2 platforms, a goods yard and a crossing loop. This loop later became defunct in 1926 as traffic dwindled, and in 1941, despite the grandeur of the station itself, it was downgraded to an unstaffed halt. Luckily, most of the station remains, including the buildings, canopies, platforms and a few more throwbacks to its railway past.
It wouldn't be one of our videos without it spontaneously bucketing it down halfway through, so sorry about the camera work, I'm holding the umbrella. South of Whitwell, the railway which once dominated the landscape now starts to become part of the landscape around it, and soon the landscape around it will swallow it up completely as we get to the tunnel. That's if we get there, because it's quite windy. So as you could probably tell by the last clip, the weather was pretty horrendous. Our umbrella broke and we had to retreat to Whitwell. So we've had to come back today and continue our journey, the final part of this line. We're going to pick up where we left off, south of Whitwell, and try and find the north portal of St Lawrence Railway Tunnel, or High Hat Railway Tunnel as it's also known.
We rejoin the railway at Whitwell Road crossing, where the gatekeeper's cottage is still in place. From here, it's a 300-metre walk into the overgrown cutting to the north portal of the tunnel.
What do you think now?
Spooky.
Spooky. We just checked out St Lawrence Railway Tunnel, which was very cool and very spooky, wasn't it?
Very spooky.
Nell was a lot more braver than I was, but yes, it was fantastic. It was nice to see. So we're now walking up St Radigan's path. I think it's called St Radigan's, something like that, and it pretty much follows the alignment of the railway through the tunnel to the south portal. So when we get to the other side of the hill, we have to walk down some very steep steps to try and find the south portal of the tunnel before we get to St Lawrence Station.
As we reach the top of the down, the sun comes out, and we are treated to wonderful views over Woody Bay. The dramatic coastline here is infamous for its history of smuggling and shipwrecks. No less dramatic was the path of the railway emerging from the cliff face high above the town and treading along a narrow ridge blasted into the side of the hill. Down the steps and under the overhang, we find the south portal of the tunnel. Looking inside, we can see the sharp curve at the end of the bore, explaining why we couldn't see daylight from the other end. As the train left the tunnel and into the light, the passengers must have gasped at the grand views over this spectacular coastline. Along Seven Sisters Road, a vast retaining wall was needed to support the railway above, as it descended into St Lawrence Station. We're at St Lawrence Railway Station. It's still here, it's still in good nick. This was the original terminus for the line when it was built in 1897. It wasn't until 1900, 3 years later, the line actually extended into Ventnor at a station called Ventnor Town. It was later renamed Ventnor West. The station at St Lawrence sits on a plateau under the cliff, but above the town. The limit of space here meant the station could only be served by a single line, squashed between the platform and the imposing rock face. The rather narrow railway bridge still remains in place, and the line towards Ventnor West is still traceable, now housing some pretty swanky holiday homes. North of Inglewood Park, the remains of one last overbridge can be found deep under the overcliff. Some rather slippery steps then allow us to conveniently walk the last stretch of the railway alignment. This is it, the last couple of 100 metres of railway line on the Isle of Wight left to walk. The weather's held off so far. It's just about to rain again. We're walking down towards the last station on the list, number 40 of 40, which is Ventnor West. Before we get there though, let's take a wide look at the railways which once reached to all four corners of this little island. Most built out of ambition, but plagued with financial hardship. They changed the landscape, in some places rather dramatically. They allowed us to travel from coast to coast in mere hours instead of days. They brought civilization to ancient villages, food and goods to our doors. But they died out as impatience and convenience took over. Today though, that convenience has worn thin, and with new trains being hailed as the quicker and eco-friendlier option, how convenient would it be now if these lost lines had somehow survived? For the Ventnor West branch though, it was a railway doomed to fail from the start. Built on a whim, maybe out of desperation or just because they could. But for all its grand construction, the line lasted only a smidge over 50 years. And in 1952, the most picturesque railway on the Isle of Wight closed for good. So that's it, that's the final station, number 40 of 40 on the list. We'd like to say a massive thank you to everyone who has liked the videos and subscribed to the channel. We never thought we'd get this many likes and views. We were just doing it for a laugh. And yes, it became a bit of a thing, so thank you so much. Just because this series is over though, doesn't mean that the channel is over. Nell is going to be starting her new series next week. So that's it for now. Please do like and subscribe, and thank you very much once again. We are off to the pub.